It is Sunday morning, and as I was saying last week, I've been spending a lot of time since the Virginia Beach retreat really just listening to gravity. Like, rather than keep going despite gravity, I've actually just been listening to gravity. I've been listening to my body. I've been listening to my balance and my alignment. And it's so interesting because I've done a lot of different, like, physical things throughout my life. But it was my overall lack of attention to what I was doing that really had the biggest detriment to my body. And what I mean is that, like, I would do sports, I would do martial arts, I would do stuff like that. But the rest of the time, I wasn't, like, stretching adequately. I wasn't, taking those moments where, like, "Oh, my back is sore. I should sit the fuck down." I wasn't doing that, and it's because I had something to prove, somewhere to get, someone to be, or something along those lines. And so this last week, especially this last 2 days, I have just not take took not taken the time, took the time. I didn't take the time, is what I'm saying. I made the goddamn time. I just decided to go, I am gonna go and lie on the floor and just fucking stretch out for however long. That's the nice part. There was no clock, no phone, no way to tell or measure the time around me, and frankly, I did not give a fuck. I did not give a fuck. What I did do was get very attentive to my body that I am. Because something about a recent conversation that we were having is like, "Oh, the body is just an illusion." No, it's real. It's absolutely it's your vehicle as much as it is also you. It's an extension of you. There's no mind body disconnect, right? The mind is the body is the mind. And so really spending some time to pay attention to that is really just spending some time to pay attention to yourself. And thus reality. And that's why all of a sudden we're like, "Oh, I should go do something. Oh, fuck. What if somebody, is going to call, or I got to do this later." And we start thinking about all this other shit. And it's just like, there is your opportunity. That is a workout in itself. Just pay attention and stop trying to resolve it. Just let that shit stretch out and unwind. And that's what I've been doing the last couple of days and the last couple of weeks, especially. And what's funny is my body is just like, what the fucking hell? All of a sudden, I'm more aware of, like, when I'm not drinking enough water. I'm more aware of, like, my balance and how I'm walking. I'm more aware of my breathing. I'm more aware of where there are knots that I just overlooked for years. And it's not even in those times when I'm stretching out. It's after the fact, by virtue of the attention that I'm spending or I'm paying to my body, to myself, to my life. So it's just so interesting how something so simple can have such a profound ripple. And I've just been enjoying the shit out of it. That said, I want to mention very quickly, I'm going to pass it over to Andrew because I've been rambling like a motherfucker. We have a guest today. We have a guest who's been on the roundtables, has been to the Patreon calls, he's been to a couple of the retreats, and now he is going to be offering private one-on-one chats via Dualistic Unity. You can find his one-on-one chat options at dualisticunity.com/Levi. That's Levi. Of course, I'll throw the link up here on the screen. I'm just going to pass this over to Andrew, and then we're going to get to Levi. But good morning, everyone. Welcome.
Good fucking morning, Levi. Fucking pumped to chat with you, man. One of my favorite people out there. Been to a number of retreats. We've always had a blast. And I will pass it over to you in a sec, but I just want to say how funny it is, the body stuff. Like the amount of fucking years, dude, I spent working out, lifting weights, knowing there were all sorts of things going, like different, like I had my tendon that ran through my chest into my shoulder down to my bicep. Like I've felt pain there from doing different exercises for years and just like never even took an extra day off or thought like maybe we tone this down, because the thought of like not having as much muscle there. It's like who am I doing it for? Like, why is this a thing so much? And it's been like really, really interesting how much overlap there is in everything, like how relaxed I feel throughout my life and like how little how much less I'm paying attention to myself moment to moment and like letting myself stumble, fall, fail more often and like and going hand in hand with like how much focus I have on how I look. Like the crossover has just been really interesting. So I've been in a very, very similar boat. I do my hangs on my pull-up bar. I'll just lie down on the ground sometimes and feel things more so. Even sitting down right now, I can feel like my hip back here. There's some tightness. So it's yeah, it's been a lot of fun and I always laugh looking back on how many years there was not paying attention to that and just fucking running through all of it. But I will now stop rambling and pass it over to Levi. Levi, how you doing, man? Great to see you. Super excited to hang today.
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. Cool to be here. I'm finding this body attention discussion quite interesting because for the last couple of days, inspired by you, Andrew, I've actually removed my mattress. So I've now been sleeping on the floor for 2 nights so far, and it is so interesting because you feel like you immediately feel all the problems because you're lying there like flat on the ground, just as you say, right, just trying to sleep basically. And then I just feel how wrong the body is. And I've had a mattress for my whole life, so it's just been supporting wherever I'm a little bit out of shape. But now I really feel like where the problems are. And the interesting thing is when I woke up both these mornings, it was just so natural for me to start stretching because I was like, oh, right, yeah, I can feel, this hair. I'll do a little bit of this, I'll do a little bit of that. And I'm already on the floor. So it's just, I'm just doing it like it was just so natural. It wasn't something I had to do because I was feeling it kind of, because I was also quite attentive of it because I had, been doing something new and, you're obviously more attentive then. But yeah, it's been an interesting progress to more naturally feel these things because I've been on the whole yoga train for a while, and that's very much like a sequence. You're gonna do this and then this and then this and then this and then you're good. It's like yeah, as you said, Ray, at some point in some episode, like how these yogis or whoever at some point they were, first of all, they didn't even, they probably were nothing, and they were just really attentive to their body and just started to do these things. And then someone was like, hey, you seem to be doing well, can I join this game? And then it became this whole sequence thing. So it's been interesting. I've been doing more of that the last couple of days. So it's yeah, it's been cool, interesting.
I'm really glad you brought that up, and the only reason is because we get so caught up in labels, like so caught up, like we look at something like yoga or a yogi, right? And we don't recognize that neither of those things really exist in the same way that the English language doesn't really exist. It's just a bunch of shit that we do. That's what it is. It's not a thing on its own. Like there's no such thing as a yogi. There's no universal fucking label that says now it's not, we're not born into it, right? It's just a label we made up ourselves. It's not a real thing. That person is just a person. That's all. They're just a person doing person things. They're personing, in their own distinctly personal way. And then we're just like, oh, well, they're doing this specific thing a lot though. So we're going to give that a label. Like now it's a thing. It's like, no, it's still just what it was. It's still just what it was. But then we get lost in it. And it's funny that you mentioned that in yoga, that there's this, go to this, now you're good. And isn't that funny? Like we get to the sense that, okay, now you've completed the whole thing. It's like, why isn't that determined by you? Why isn't that determined by you? Because it's fucking satisfying to feel like you've achieved something, that you've managed to reach completion.
Yeah. Oh, the reaching completion. It's so that goes in so many ways, and I won't delve into the obviously, the place that my mind immediately goes straight into the gutter. But it is like it's very symbolic of a lot of things we do in life, and we prioritize the completion. and how much value we give the completion, despite it just being, a moment, maybe a little bit more than a moment. I mean, it depends on the gender as well, and there I go, back on that track. But the prioritization of that, like even now thinking of there being like a divide, like finishing a yoga class, for example, meaning something about me on top of just what I got out of it. And even just being able to identify as someone who does yoga. Like I'm a person who does yoga, and therefore that's something that I can talk about with someone else instead of it just coming back to like feeling your body, just like straight up feeling your body and realizing like there isn't anyone to look to. Like there isn't someone who knows your body better than you. And it's starting to seem like very obvious why it's like an absurd thing to look around, like to spend your life looking around. But I guess in our just like avoidance of suffering almost, like I was reading something yesterday that was talking about how most people prioritize not suffering over being happy. Like people don't really actually want to be happy. They just don't want to suffer. They just don't want to feel like they're, disconnected from everything else. So it becomes, instead of actually expressing yourself, we just like mitigate everything we can to avoid, that missing out. And so we'll buy into everything and completely sacrifice our experience, our just like moment to moment experience. And like you can jump into certain things and do certain things and get into stuff for sure, but it's like for you, like for me right now, how I'm living my life. And that shift's been fascinatingly obvious once I start to sit in that, but like also funny how much time I spent looking around to someone else. But I guess that's, a product of growing up, just like growing up in any world, you know, not just this world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like we look around to survive, and then we realize we don't have to, and then we suddenly feel fucking relaxed, and then we start to think about it again, and then we go back and forth. At least I do, on looking around. For sure, it's like there was like I've been trying to like come to this conversation here like without like too much of a preconception and plan and things to talk about and all this shit. But there was one thing I wanted to bring up because it hit me quite hard, and for some reason it wasn't on top of mind. Maybe it shouldn't have been anything. Fuck that. But it was just because I get a little bit nervous, before coming on here, and also before coming on like a call-in show and stuff like that. And there was just one thing you said, Ray, like when I was in the queue for coming on to the call-in show on Tuesday. And then you talked about like the guy who was there kind of trying to prove he was right and you guys were wrong, basically. And then he told in the beginning like how nervous he was. And then you said like, yeah, because he's coming here to prove something, you know and that just made me look at, because I was sitting there in the queue and it was like burning inside of me because I was so fucking nervous. And it just hit me like I'm sitting here in the queue, I'm coming on for 10 minutes to just talk about something, and just how fucking serious I'm taking it, and myself, of course, that's where it's coming from. So that it's been some interesting days, to say the least, after that, because it's just really, it's not like it's not something wrong. I feel like being nervous is okay, but it's an indicator of something. Like it's not happening for no reason whatsoever. So it just made me really look at kind of the time coming up to this thing, and like every time there come like a story that I want to tell and blah 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 blah, I'm like, because that's me trying to make sure this is amazing, or whatever that Levi wants this to be, and it's just been watching that, and that's been really interesting because it's it's like when you see something a little bit more clearly, it kind of gets less of a hold on me. So it just took away a little bit of the edge of like all the time running up to the call today and everything. Yeah, I don't know, I just wanted to share that because that kind of, it's kind of been like this since Tuesday up until now, very prevalent in my head, because yeah, I'm still taking myself very seriously. so so that is just something to, yeah, I don't know,
I'm really
yeah.
glad you brought that up, man, for sure, because that's funny, because that's really the split between like nervousness and anxiety versus excitement, right? Is how much you've invested in your previous self, right? You're like, I got to prove who I am going into this. Oh, I'm super nervous. Whereas you're just like, wondering who I'm going to become. It becomes a totally different thing because you're not trying to maintain that previous self. You're not trying to defend it. You're not trying, to justify or validate it, right? So there's no reason to be nervous because you're not carrying anything with you, right? So you're excited because you're like, I wonder what's going to happen. And as you notice from how we start these episodes, that's kind of where we start off. We're just kind of like, all right, well, let's hit the fucking go live button and see what happens, right? And it's because we could take this very seriously. We could think about, what impact are we going to have? What is the listener going to take away from all of this? And all we do is get in the way of whatever it's going to be otherwise. All we're doing is doing that for ourselves. It has nothing to do with the listener, and it's all about our own judgments and fears. All about our own judgments and fears. Right? And so why do that? Because what's funny about that is despite all of that hell I might create for myself, and I might be really even good at hiding it. Like I might go through all of that in my head and not show it on my face at all. I could be jovial and doing this whole thing, but it could be a show, it could be an act. And so I'm going through all that effort and putting on all this show, still worried about all this stuff I can't control, and doesn't do a goddamn thing. It doesn't give me any influence or impact over the listener at all because they're still totally free to perceive this in whatever way is appropriate to their own journey. So it's all just a waste of fucking time. It's all just a waste of time. I may as well just show up, roll the dice, and just continue on. Roll them again. Roll them again. Look at that. We're getting good at rolling dice. At least it's authentic.
Yeah, having the curiosity of like how it's gonna go, like how you're gonna do something is so much more exciting, but there's not like the thought even of like showing up to something without so much of a plan, still there's still very much a side of me that's like, we gotta have some sort of plan. It's like, for what? For what? Am I gonna spend life planning? Like, is that gonna be how I live? Is like, I planned super well my whole life. Never really found out what it was like to actually express myself, be myself, like in the moment, like right now, wherever this is going, whatever's happening, and like so many things. Because even with the anxiety, the nerves, there's the fear of like even bringing it up or expressing that. It's like, if there's not a direction, there's not a path, there's not a right or a wrong thing to bring up or say ever. It's just like, be involved, and wherever you're at, like express that. Like you can even just like jumping around in a conversation to different topics. We could delve into anything right now. Daylight savings just happened last night. It's like still doing stupid fucking shit. Ray doesn't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it. No.
This was more so an example of just directions that we could take, because I think every daylight savings over the last 2.5 years, we've brought it up and bitched just a little bit about it. So that was, each time it's going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. Next time around, it's going to be like daylight savings, stupid fucking shit. Until maybe, who knows? Maybe very soon there will be a shift. You never know. Enough people get behind it. It's like the one thing I'll vote for that if there's a vote coming up, and that's about it.
We're just gonna have a dualistic unity schedule that is fucking daylight savings time fucking exclusive. Like it just doesn't include it. It's the same goddamn schedule, which means what's that? It was 4 o'clock during one part of your life, and now it's 5 o'clock, motherfucker. And that's it. And you just got to adapt.
I love it. Fuck you, DLS.
I'm not sure if I know you didn't really want to talk about it, but they actually decided, like, I don't know, 5, 10 years ago in Europe to remove it, and they still haven't decided like which one to choose. So it's just still the same, like in the switch that is happening. So yeah,
Oh
it's
my God, that's so perfectly brilliant. It's like we've made a decision to sit in more indecision.
Oh, the symbolism of that. Oh my goodness gracious. Yeah. Oh god. It's like, yeah, it seems like a smart call, but yeah, we're not quite can't decide on because yeah, I guess again you gotta make the final call with it still too.
Well, because it doesn't even work psychologically, right? Like if we're thinking about it, like, oh yeah, no, it's gonna make our days feel. No, it doesn't. It doesn't do that because the seasons continue their procession, which means the days get longer or shorter by a minute every fucking day anyway. So it really doesn't do anything except add another like influence to fuck with us. That's all it does. Like I woke up this morning, I looked at my stove clock, and then I looked at my phone clock, and I went, "What?" And then I went, "What month is it? What fucking day is it? Is that when it switches over?" And I had a whole thought process that didn't have to be there. That didn't have to happen at all. It was just like this morning, you're going to wake up to a little bit of fucking confusion on our part. You're welcome. Enjoy. And it's like, thanks so much. And it doesn't do anything. But again, it's something to bitch about, which is kind of fun in itself, right? I mean, isn't it funny when you look at a lot of stand-up comedy? It's really just somebody standing up there bitching about something. It's kind of fun, right? But it's bitching at it in a way where you're not actually letting it get to you, right? Where you're looking at the humor and the absurdity of it, but it's never getting that emotional penetration where it's really fucking riling you up, and you can feel that. It's interesting. I've been having conversations about God on Instagram and TikTok lately, just from a couple of posts that I've made recently. And somebody was like, well, if not through prayer, then how do we better align? How do we find ourselves? And I'm just like, self honesty. And it seems so fucking revolutionary, doesn't it? Because we want to have something to be self honest about. It's a lot like the idea of responsibility. When you talk about responsibility, people are like, well, what am I responsible for? Your response to everything, right? And that's kind of the whole point, is that I was going somewhere with this. Help me out.
Uh responsibility moment. Oh God, the God posts, 3 God
Yes,
posts.
there
Yes.
was a point to the God post and that all, and I went towards responsibility, and there was a point before that, and it's gone now. So I'm gonna stop talking.
Yeah. The moment to moment responsibility is interesting because it's like it seems
I found
like
it.
yeah,
I'm
go for it.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So, responsibility in the same way as like self honesty. Self honesty is not a thing per se that you can do. It's not about you looking back at your life and going, and I was a dick there, right? Self honesty is a moment to moment thing. Self honesty is a moment to moment relationship with yourself. I'm getting agitated. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I feel competitive. I feel diminished. These are experiences that in the moment we have to be honest about. Most of the time we just run from them, try to fix them, cope with them, right? Or focus on other people to make them go away. And so it's not about the idea of self honesty being like, well, I've got to tell you all, I did this and this thing once and I feel really bad about it. Like that's not it. But the self honesty there is, why do you need to tell us? Right there. Why is it about us at all? What is it that you're trying to soothe? And so it's a moment to moment thing in the same way that responsibility is. But it's not the concept of self-honesty. It's not the kind of self-honesty where you can cherry pick what you're going to be self-honest about so you can feel good about being self-honest. It's that kind of self-honesty that comes with that fucking resigned sigh I'm taking myself seriously. And that's the kind of honesty. And that's responsibility. It's the same goddamn thing. Thanks for letting me circle back to that.
Absolutely. That the self the reality of that, because deep down it's like it's always right there, like the self honesty, like it's always and how quick I've found it interesting, like because I'll still judge myself from time to time, and again, it's like I'm not getting better at it necessarily. I'm just recognizing more and more the futility in it and like the reality of what it is, that it's not really, it's like a way of avoiding self-honesty in a lot of ways. Very much so. But like with the judgment stuff, there's almost there was some, I forget what the quote exactly was, but it's like when you stop judging others and only judge yourself, or if like you're judging others, you're all the way from it or something. It was like 100%. If you only judge yourself, you're 50%. And then if you stop doing both, you're, there. And yes. There. Yeah. Thank you. He who blames others has a long way to go on his journey. He who blames himself is halfway there. And he who blames no one has arrived. And so like, I feel like a lot of people get caught in that middle, and I say that as a complete assumption only because I do. But like seeing how easy, because like still with the judgment of others, it'll still come up, and like how when you're being more self-honest, like how quick it can be a way to soothe a discomfort about yourself. Like if you don't want to look at yourself, or you don't want to look at how that situation is making you uncomfortable, you'd be so quick to just like make fun of someone, just like call someone out. And like, it's almost this strange, easy way out that just puts you at odds with everything. And it's like easy way out sort of, but it's still like, what does that do for your experience right now? It's like gives you a little hit or a lack of the discomfort you were feeling, maybe just because now you're at odds in comparison with someone else. But it's the same thing that, on the other side of comparison makes you feel worse about stuff. The judgment stuff's interesting.
Yeah. I know a little about self-judgment and judgments of others as well. So yeah, it's for sure an interesting one. I mean, it's like because I kind of you can kind of feel or it's becoming quite obvious that it doesn't have a purpose other than kind of the immediate observation of something that is happening and taking what we want from it, kind of. But yeah, so like we're still doing it like all the time. It doesn't have any yeah, I don't know if it's like habitual or if it's like kind of giving me something. I saw you, yeah, so it's like, oh yeah, it's a good question. I have actually not thought so much about exactly it's just I'm thinking a little bit out loud here, like where it's coming from, like why do I still feel the need to do it? And I guess you say, like, Andrew, you kind of there's something else I'm trying to cover up, sort of. Who knows? I don't know. Uh,
That's a really good question. I thought about this one a lot because I spent so much time judging myself. That's all I knew for a long time. And there's a hit that we get out of it, to the point where we'll judge ourselves for judging ourselves. Isn't that fun? Because that really is the question, right? Because we can spend all of this time going, why do I need to judge myself? And I know I did that for years, and it really helped me uncover all kinds of shit for sure. But at the end of the day, my brain's going to judge regardless. Isn't that funny? It's like, why am I judging myself? It's all your brain knows how to do. If your brain conceptualizes you, it compares it to something else. We think of that as judgment because we take that shit personally. It's the only reason. It's because we take it personally. Otherwise, it's not judgment. It's kind of like when you offer feedback to somebody and they get upset about it. right? And you're like, I'm not judging you. I'm just giving you feedback. Your brain's not judging you. It's just giving you feedback. And it looks at the concept of you and compares it to the concept of everything else it knows. It's putting you in context. And you're like, oh, I don't like how that makes me feel. And then it's like, it's not a judgment. You're just taking it personally. And that's the point, is that if you can stop looking at it as, why do I need to judge myself? And think of it more as, why do I think that's about me? Like, why do I keep thinking that's the whole picture? Why do I keep thinking that that's, the entirety of it? Because isn't it funny? Like, we'll take right up to the moment where our brain's like, aha, you're somewhere in this context. And we're like, oh, stop, hold the presses right fucking there. We've achieved the end point. It's like, no, just keep processing. You'll feel different in a second. Right? Because your brain's going to move on to the next bit of information that it's processing. The context will change. Your place in that spectrum will change again. Right. But we get to a point where we're like, I don't like how that feels. And so it's not the process of quote unquote judgment that we're really dealing with. It's how much we're making it about us. It's how much we're looking for that idea of who we are that makes us feel good, like we were talking about earlier, rather than just recognizing that the idea of who we are is always going to shift and it's never the reality. So you can never invest in it as a path to happiness. And that frustrates us. Because if we can't invest in that as a path to happiness, if we cannot invest in this idea of ourself, what can we invest in as a path to happiness? Nothing. It's the whole point. Because once you've stopped investing in the path to happiness, you find yourself alive here with infinite options. But while we're determined to be happy, we create all kinds of fucking sadness. And it's because I want to be happy. I want to be happy, and because I'm miserable because of my judgments, I think I need to find happier judgments. Right? It never dawns on me the thinking about myself is the problem. I just want to find a way to do that in a positive way. I want to find a way to do that makes me feel good. I am spiritual, not physical. All that shit. I love that stuff. Every time I hear somebody say that, you're like, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. It really makes me sick to my stomach in so many ways, because it's just one of those things like you might as well just start masturbating publicly. Because that's really all it is at the end of the day, is that we all belong to a loving, infinite consciousness. What are you fucking doing? What are you doing? Stop projecting everything onto the universe that you wish was here and ask yourself what kind of universe you are now.
It's the same lack of connection. Like, it's the same division right there. Like, it's the same sort of disconnect with, like, it's almost puts a little cushion in between you and things. And the amount of like throwing old videos in like the AI Opus clip from old episodes is always fun for me, just because, like, looking back, there's a side where I feel way less certain about everything, like showing up for anything, way more relaxed. And looking back at those, like, I almost respect the conviction I felt like I had. Like, I'll get on there and be like, way more timid than I am now, and be like, it's so nice, like, knowing that I'm not Andrew. Just like knowing that. It's like, oh gosh. It's like, until I knew that, like, once I found that out, it was like, oh, what could go wrong? What's there to worry about? No, it's like, it's all good, brother. It's all playing out. I'm not Andrew anymore. I'm just reality. It's like, oh god, like, it's dude, and it's a great practice, admittedly, like, being able, because, like, there are times where right now, and like current videos, there's times where I'm thinking about myself, and like the other day from season 6, episode 17, like, awesome episode for anyone who hasn't checked that one out. But like, there were some clips where I was talking with like a conviction as well, that I was almost judging in how I was feeling, because like during that episode I was feeling very relaxed, but also very like intense in a lot of ways. And then like today, I saw those clips again, and I was like they're totally fine. Like I don't know. Like I don't know how they're gonna be perceived. I was just kind of judging myself for having this same sort of conviction. And so like with the old videos or the current videos, it's the same sort of thing. Like it's the same thing. And I was talking with a friend for a bit yesterday who posts social media stuff, and he's posted videos for like 10 years. And he was saying how like, yeah, looking back at old videos, he doesn't really judge himself so much for them because he sees them as growth. Like he sees it as not even growth, but like evolution in a sense. Like it's not, because I think growth implies that you've changed in like a better way, and it's really just shifting and looking at, perspectives of yourself that informed where you're at now. And so for me to judge that is for me to judge myself now. And so it's a cool practice, I guess, and being able to see yourself in any situation without so much judgment, like almost as if it's another person, but not, because that again is just like, more of that buffer. It's like, oh, that's not me. It's like it is just like everyone else is. It's not that you're not that implies that you're like not everything else. It's just another opportunity to let go, like recognize that those perspectives of that, or a recognition, doesn't have to be personal, just like it doesn't right now.
Yeah, I've had like a lot shorter like time span on my TikTok than you, Andrew, but I've recognized some of the like similar things, like because how I'm kind of judging a video a couple of days later, or a week later, or a month later, and it's like because it's like I don't think like I've changed, but I think there are like different versions of me looking at it. Like even though it's just a couple of days ago, it's like maybe I'm very pumped up when I'm looking at a video where where I am very relaxed, and then I see some videos where I'm super serious, like in the video, and maybe I'm feeling a bit playful when I'm watching it, so I'm judging how serious I am at that moment. And then, in another moment, I'm maybe like super relaxed, and I'm watching one of my relaxed videos, and I love it, like even though it's an older video. So I don't know if it's like, because I really feel lately that this whole idea of being like who be yourself, right? That's like, but that's just changing all the time. It's like I feel like in this moment I'm this, in this I'm this. I'm just looking. I feel different all the time. So I'm just wondering, like I'm not even wondering it. It's just it's not an answer. It's never an answer. I'm always different. And I'm, yeah, it's very freeing because that's a little bit of the process that I think I went through from like Tuesday until today. Like the whole thinking about how serious I'm taking myself. It's because there is this idea of who I should be when I'm sitting here. But when you're not, when you're not being that thing, then you can do anything. You can, be engaged and calm and say nothing and say a lot and laugh a lot and just look and be serious. And there's just no rules. There's never any rules. So I can just sit there and do whatever I'm feeling at any time. And that's the thing. I feel like be yourself. Like, because there's this thing about being yourself that I've always struggled understanding. Like, because it's like, but who is that, And I'm like, sitting there trying to figure that out instead of just being myself. Because, yeah. So, yeah, it's been some interesting things going on there as well.
Well said. Absolutely. I'm going back to the conversation I was having with somebody about God, because there's this thing. It's like, well, if I'm not, praying to the universe and asking God for insight and all that, what do I do? It's like, just be here. But if you know that you're never what you think you are, then being here is an infinitely complex, unfolding experience that never stops changing. Isn't that interesting? It's just an accepting that you're never what you think you are. Nothing is what you think it is, that life continues to be so full. But we actually settle for this idea of a lofty concept to supplement our lack of living. It's like, no, if I'm in line with this fiction, there now I feel alive and right and righteous and all this shit. And it's like, is that really that's what you're settling for? Is that temporary high that's going to get diminished every time someone threatens it? As opposed to changing and being free to be whatever you are all the time. Because that's the point. Like, if you look at a lot of what we go through in our life, like the typical midlife crisis, right? Somebody's been the same person their whole fucking life. They all of a sudden they get to a point where they're like, shit, none of this is working. I need to change person. And it's all of a sudden they do. And it's like, well, you could have done that the whole time. Like the whole reason that you didn't want to do that or do this or do that is because it wasn't who you thought you were. Right? Where you could have allowed yourself to organically change. This is why, I always get, I guess, kind of amazed by parents who get really bent out of shape. It's like, oh, my kid's going through a really rebellious stage right now. It's like, it's a stage. It's a stage. That's right. It's like, oh, my kid's really into tattoos. And I don't know what they're going to do with their future. No, you don't. It's true. You're absolutely right. You don't. They don't even know. Right. But this is where our resistance to change comes from, is this idea of being yourself, like you said, is something. Now I found who I am. Don't do that. It's like, as soon as you're holding on to that, like, what do you're gonna find one person to be, and then that's it. That's your personality. That's who you are. That's what you do for the rest of your life till you die. That's exhausting, especially given that you're trying to change all the time. Do you know how much work it would take to not change? And that's where a lot of our conflict comes from. Regardless of the input that's coming in right now, this is where I make a stand. And we do that shit all the time. We do that shit all the time. By the way, and I wanted to mention this, I don't know if it's still on my Instagram story, but it could be. One of my videos about God and prayer and all of that got a great response. And it was, I think, one of my favorite responses, in that it was a huge paragraph. And it started with, "It's cool that you want to share your opinions about God," which I thought was great. And then the next line was, "But it's arrogant," and then it went on to just pound into me for just, how dare I take this stance and say anything whatsoever. So I just thought it was really funny that it started with, "It's cool," and ended with, "You're an arrogant piece of shit." So apparently it's cool. I just like that. Because again, you see right there, it's that whole thing of, you could have this conversation. You could look at why you're offended. You could look at why you're upset. You could look at why you're commenting. Right? Or you could point the finger at me. Or you can point the finger at me. And often we're just like, I'm going to defend this fiction that at certain points has made me feel higher than others. Because I'm hoping it will again.
Awesome. I was just thinking with the judgment, like that's exactly what I'm doing with self judgment. Actually, it's like it's something I don't want to look at, and then I just blame it on something, instead of actually looking at it. I just wanted to pop in quickly with that, because I feel it's like, in this case he's using you, but I'm using myself a lot to do the same thing, kind of.
Yeah, that reminds me. So like I think it's Carl Jung talks about the shadow and whatnot, and I've never really. I don't think I've ever. Not that I understand it, but like until very recently, even understood like what that was in reference to, because I think for myself there was that side that like I just kind of buried and didn't want to look at. And it's the more and more, and even just Levi, as you were talking right there, the more and more I realize like that side of myself that maybe, anxious, nervous, worried, concerned, blah, 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 all the deeper things, fear of jumping in to things, and like self-doubt and yada yada yada, like realizing that everyone's got some variation of that. It's like, who am I to bury it and like assume that it shouldn't be there, and then just build this armor against it, and like it cuts me off from everyone. And it's so and yeah, so that's something interesting, I guess, with the self-judgment. But one thought I did have about the comment too is how funny it makes me realize, like, how few people, even on a video like that, will like ask a question in a comment about a video. It's like, here's a thought and here's another thought. And it's never like a curiosity, like, oh, interesting perspective, like blah, 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 to have a conversation. It's just statements. It's just statement after statement after statement after statement. And is that because, like, I see you so often respond with like, thanks for coming around to self-validate or self-soothe. Like, and I've, understood that for the most part too. But I think even just realizing that, like, it just hit me how rare it is for someone to ask a question in a comment. It's just fucking statements. It's
Straight
like,
up, for my benefit, I am leaving this comment because there is a hole in myself that I must fill. And that's why I say, well, thank you for stopping by to self-validate. Unless they actually have a point or are asking a question or engaging in conversation, but most of the part, it's nuh-uh. That's really all it is. And you're like, well, I appreciate you popping by to do that because that's really the only reason you dropped in. Now, that said, as it is a live show, we have a question from somebody in the audience. I want to say thank you, first of all, to everybody who is in the audience at the moment. We always appreciate you being here. I'm going to pass this one over to Levi since he is our guest of honor today. What are your thoughts on depression and overthinking, which enables that?
Yeah, I mean, overthinking for sure. I've been, delving with a lot in my life, and have periods that are less happy than others, I guess. But I think it all comes down to, or well, I feel there, if I start with overthinking, like from my perspective, um, it's very much about trying to control what's going to happen in the future. So an example I had, at some point I was like at a silent retreat, right? And the first day we talked together, and then we were like silent for 2 days, and then we started to talk together again. And basically what happened to me, that at that retreat, was I was kind of noticing, as soon as like the silence was like upon us and we weren't supposed to look each other in the eye or anything, everything, it was like an enormous like weight that came off of me, because suddenly I didn't have to try to control everything that was happening. I could stop thinking about, like, okay, how should I approach this person? Should I say hello? Should I look another way? And all these, especially in the social situation, I was on like high alert, and trying to think like how to best be perceived in this situation. And then when like the silence came like went away, and it was like I was walking from my cabin like up to the main house in the morning, and there was like two roads that came like this. And then one guy was walking like a little bit in front of me. So then it started again. It's like, okay, should I kind of uh, go up a little bit in speed so I meet him, or should I slow down? Do you think he wants to talk, or does he not want to talk because it was so nice with these silent days? So maybe he's super eager to talk because he hasn't talked to anyone for 2 days, and it just started again. So it's like, I don't know exactly like where that was very much where my overthinking was going on. It was going on all the time. So that was a big one for me, to just see the madness that was going on up there, and just feel like how much weight I was putting on this stuff. So I'm not sure if that's like an answer, but it's sure as hell my thoughts on it, because it's just you can just watch it, because it's. Oh, and it's not necessary. Like it's so much easier to just go over to someone and say, hello if you want to say hello, be silent if you want to be silent, and then just see what happens. It's just it. Oh man, and I think people notice it in me as well when I'm not doing the overthinking, because if I'm doing the overthinking coming over there, I'm like, oh, coming over there, on like high alert, and then or I'm just coming over there and sitting down, and it's nothing. It's not a thing, even. So yeah, just some thoughts.
Perfect.
Uh,
Pass it over
yeah.
to Andrew next. Thank you. I appreciate it. Overthinking, man, because that's it, right? Overthinking creates weight. And that's what pushes us down. That's that depression.
Yeah, and kind of just like to add to what Levi was saying, a big part, I think, and it's been hitting me more recently, just how with overthinking and even trying to control that, like assuming that it's better to have no thoughts than to have thoughts, when it's really just like how personally am I taking these thoughts? Because when they're less personal, it's like the thoughts aren't necessarily not going to be there, but there is my responsibility of my perspective of them and how much I just assume they mean something about me. It's like, kind of fluttering on by. And then if I have this, if I'm trying to maintain some degree of control, how I'm perceived, how someone thinks about me, how I think about myself, it's like I'm going to think that those mean something. Like as soon as I'm trying to have some sense of control of what I am, or not willing to realize that, like, I am going to keep changing, like I am going to keep shifting, then it's not something that I have to be so concerned about when that constant is more of the change, but it's like a a trade-off in a sense of that sense of certainty, but with the sense of certainty comes the weight. It's like pulling all of those thoughts down and like holding on to them to be sure of something instead of just like realizing that they're not so personal. Like they don't have to I don't have to assume that they mean something about me. And like, who's to say there isn't some variation that's like always being heard by everyone, and I'm just taking my thing personally and attaching some sort of idea and narrative, and that's like the personalization of that and the focus on it is a lot of what creates that weight for myself when I get focused on that. And then there's the desire to maintain some perspective of myself. And if I'm trying to maintain some perspective of myself, then it's always going to be on the line. It's always going to be on the chopping block, like up for change, because like it's always changing and I'm just trying to maintain it because I don't want it to change, even though it always is and it always has been. And so my concern and hesitation and self-doubt is like the it's almost like the doubt that I have that I can maintain the idea or maintain a perspective of myself. Because if I'm not trying to maintain it, then like there's less of a doubt that I could, because it's not something that could even happen. Like it's not even a possibility. But so those are some of my thoughts.
Also helpful. They followed up and said, Andrew has mentioned on his TikTok, nothing is really wrong with us. We only think there is. I struggle with sadness due to my past. So I want to talk about this one because I get that. I went through a decade of that. And I mean that, a decade. Like there's 10 years of my life that's lost in darkness and shit. And I'll never get those years back. And it just kept getting darker because I kept looking at how dark it was. It kept getting sadder because I kept looking at how sad it was. And I didn't recognize that although that was true, that the perspective I was looking at wasn't necessarily inaccurate. It was destroying my life because I thought it meant something about me, not that it was just something I went through. I thought that it meant something about my life, that because my life had been so sad, I had a sad life, not recognizing there's still more life, right? A sad moment doesn't make a sad day. A sad day doesn't make a sad month. A sad month doesn't make a sad year. A sad year doesn't make a sad life. It really helps to recognize that none of this defines your path, your potential, or what you can do right now, but you are carrying it with you. You're carrying it with you because there's a payoff to that sadness, to looking at your life. You think you know who you are. And that's all it is. It gives you some kind of certainty. This is me. This is my life. This is what it means. And this is what I have to deal with. And you don't recognize that that decision, that narrative, that idea of yourself that you're holding on to of your life is what keeps it in front of your fucking face. And it makes it so goddamn heavy because you keep adding weight to it. The weight comes from you. And the alternative is to recognize you don't know. You don't know that the story of your life was sad because you don't know how it will turn out. You don't know all of the impact that it has already had or all of the impact it will continue to have. Because you can look at your past the way you do right now, but one day you're going to look at your past as a source of inspiration. And you're going to look at it as a source of strength and empathy and growth and change. And all of a sudden, what you perceive to be sad will change to empowering. So it really helps to recognize that your perception of your life is not your life. That the only reason it feels so goddamn heavy is because you're invested in it as who you think you are. And the alternative is to admit you don't know and continue on, and everything changes from there. And I say this 25 years after getting out of my hell, and I live a life now that I never thought was possible. So from me to you, I'm telling you, you got this. It's going to be okay. Just don't hold on to that idea that you know anything about your potential, and it will continue to unfold. And that depression, day by day, one shade of gray at a time, will disappear and become a distant memory.
And there's a perspective of your past too that starts to become more and more informative. Like you see more and more value in it the less personally I've began to take it, and just like the more willing to look at different things and different experiences and see even how vital, because like oh fuck, holy shit, from my perspective I've always had this idea that like I haven't gone through, like, both the perspective that, like, I haven't gone through enough shit, like, my life's been too comfortable to really, like, I gotta go through more stuff in order to garner perspectives, while I'm maintaining this idea that I wish certain things hadn't happened. Like, certain experiences, did something wrong, judge myself for them, judge myself for the way that I saw myself. So I'm doing both at the same time. Like, wishing something, like, thank fucking God I got at least a couple things where it's like, oh, that really hit. Like, that was the depth, because you can't compare pain, right? So, like, for me, that experience was like the depth for me. Like, that hit in a certain way. And so I haven't I don't think I've ever made that connection, that I've been doing both. Like, I've been doing, like, judging myself for the way that I acted in a certain situation, and then judging myself for not having gone through enough shit. And it's like, I don't have to do either, but like, if I hadn't had that, like, what would my experience have been like? Like, there wouldn't have been anything to pull from. And then I'd feel like I judge myself even more for thinking that I haven't gone through enough. And it would be very difficult to have empathy for anyone who's felt, that depth of like, and for me, maybe it's been certain experiences, but it's also been sort of an underlying subdued sort of suffering via avoidance in a lot of ways, instead of just, not just like not even doing anything, just not maintaining some sort of perspective, not trying to hold off a willingness to not have so much certainty, like not have this sense of control in my head of what I am that I then try to maintain. So it's always been like that's fucking oh, that's funny.
Because the alternative is just not thinking about yourself so much. And that's really unsatisfying, isn't it? Because then you're like, well, how much am I not thinking about myself? Oops.
Yeah, I've been I've been looking at that one too quite recently. It's so easy. Like you have an insight about something, and I think it's I think it's amazing because I've discovered this insight, and there I am, right back where I started. So it's like it's so interesting because it's you kind of want to hold it for a little bit at least because now you're here and you've understood this thing and all this shit, but it's always just letting it go. It's like, oh, interesting, yeah, cool. But it's so easy to get caught up in that self importance kind of thing that goes on around this, yeah,
Yeah. Well, because
or
you
any.
actually start to think that little boost is what happiness is. Like, it's interesting that we've actually equated like that little momentary, yeah, me, as like the pinnacle of existence for us. For like those moments, like, oh, I got to reach for that. No, I got to reach for that little bit. No, that was totally me. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But on the other hand, we also beat ourselves up all the time for every little thing we don't do right, every little judgment that we do have. And it's just so fucking funny, right? Because at the end of the day, the alternative is to just let go. All right. But then that, see, to me, it's so very interesting because like we have historic figures, and anybody who's never read the book How to Know God by Deepak Chopra, I really encourage you to go and check that out. It's a good book. It's a good read. Only just because he goes through a lot of history and he looks for stories of different people who have had different levels, not levels, but different, I guess, depths of recognition into the divine experience, right? And he talks about a lot of people who are, classically regarded as saints now, but at the time were just really selfless fucking people. Like they were really just people who went around knowing all of this, talking about all of this beauty, right? And then just not taking credit for it, right? Putting everybody else first because they didn't see everybody else as separate. And yet we look at all these people as being saintly, right? Like, oh, they have this huge like devotion to God. Do you really think devotion to God creates that level of selflessness, or is that devotion to you and self honesty, moment to moment to moment? It's not about you. It's not about you. Stop settling for that cheap fucking high. Stop settling for that cheap fucking hit. Stop settling for that fucking pedestal that's going to get knocked down. You do that enough, all of a sudden, there's a totally different experience that goes with listening and paying attention and being here without making it about you. That becomes the divine experience that then everybody else looks at as like, oh my God, they're saints. It's like, no, they're just really not dealing with insecurity to the same degree. They're just not making it about themselves. And isn't it interesting that selflessness and divinity kind of go hand in hand? Right? Because all you're doing is recognizing that you're a part of everything else. That's why you can let go of the fiction of yourself. It's not like you're selfless deliberately, because that's not selfless, is it? If you're out there doing things for other people because you're a selfless person, that's fucking selfish. So it can't be an overt action. It has to be a result. All right. And that result comes from letting go of one's own need to think about themselves. I get that. I always find that fascinating because I am not a spiritual person. I'm not a religious person. But there are times, just based on how I see things, where I get where the whole fiction of God and sainthood and all that shit comes from. I really do, because it really is just letting go. But it's letting go from an outside perspective that doesn't understand, that still makes it about itself. Oh, that person's a saint. No, that person's you. There's no separation at all.
I find it interesting how quick, like spirituality is to try and make it not human, like like avoid humanity, the human experience, the whole like I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, but it's like through being very, very human in a sense. Like it's very, very much the depth of like the human experience and connection with that it's like it's like through that and through just like not needing anything from people. And without without that weight of need, it's like you like if you don't need anything, then there's just space left to do things. It's just space. And then it's the same with, not preparing for something, like, and just paying attention, like not feeling like you need to be in control, not feeling like you need to continue to be something. It's like, and then you show up and then there's all of these things there. Like there's things to say, there's things to express, and there's just less you holding it back, like less you getting in the way. And all of a sudden there's, joy and humor and things are all in that spot. And like I've spent a lot of time like trying to get to those spots, finding a way, not realizing that like it's here, like it's always here in some way, whatever it is here and it's going to be here. And it's like just letting myself more and more, especially more recently, like find out what that is and like find out what it means to even not even what it means, but just the experience of being here and like not needing so much of an idea of what I should do or should say or should express, and certainly helped to realize like there's not a path, there's not a right way. It's just kind of like in this spot, like any direction is on the table. Like from moment to moment to day to whatever. And I think when you're not, trying to maintain so much of something, it's like it's there. It's there far more often. It's here. Yeah.
Isn't that funny? When we describe that experience, or rather people describe it after the fact as, God's forgiveness, but it's recognizing there's no one to forgive. And the standard with which you are judging is completely fucking false. Isn't that funny? It's here, all of a sudden, the kingdom of heaven, God's forgiveness, all that fucking stupid conceptual shit all of a sudden makes total fucking sense. Because it's not about any of the concepts of forgiveness or God or you at all. All of a sudden, that whole game just gets wiped fucking clean, and you're left with reality here now. And then we go and we describe it in spiritual terms, and it becomes some metaphysical concept of pearly gates in the fucking clouds and a fiery hell. And isn't that fucking funny? Because the symbolism's great for the human experience, for the experience of being here now. Now, that said, we got about 7 minutes left here. So I just wanted to give another shout out to our guests and say hello to everyone. If you haven't checked out the beginning of this episode yet, book a session with Levi. Levi is now offering private chats via Dualistic Unity because we asked him to do so because he's awesome to talk to. Anybody here who's already had a chat with Levi knows that. You can check out his listings on the website at dualisticunity.com/Levi. And that will take you to his two offerings for a 25-minute and a 50-minute session. You can book those online. And of course, he'll get back to you to schedule things according to your convenience. That said, though, we're really excited to have you as part of the team, man. I know you've been here on Patreon with us for a while. You've been in the groups, you've been on Discord, you've been to a couple of retreats. I've had a chance to shoot the shit with you and smoke weed and hang out, and you're just genuinely appreciated, man. Like, and I mean that because you work at it. You really do, and you work at it for your own reasons. Like, you're not out there going like, oh, I'm gonna work at this and I'm gonna learn this shit and become a coach. Like, you had no idea I was gonna even ask you to be a coach. You seem more stunned than anything. What? And it's like, yeah, that's exactly why I'm asking you, right? And it's because there's no self-importance there because you recognize you pay for it. You pay for it. And that to me is the best sign of somebody who can give any degree of insight to someone else, someone who doesn't derive importance from doing so, right? Because then all of a sudden the insights become about you being important and not about them being important. So I encourage anyone who is listening to this to book a session with Levi. It's absolutely worthwhile. And if you haven't already joined him in a Patreon call or on a round table or a call-in show, do that, because he's just fun to talk to. And of course, we're going to see him at some future retreats as well. And then we're going to have him back on the show to talk about his fucking coaching journey. I am very excited to hear about this for sure. And I'm excited to go back and forth with you as you recognize more and more that you're still just talking to yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate that shout out. Yeah, yeah, it's very exciting for me as well. This whole thing. So yeah, for sure, I'm looking forward to talking to people and just I feel that's what it is. Just listening and yeah, enjoying the company and yeah, hearing what's going on. And yeah, I've been through some shit, so maybe there's something to grab from there as well. So no, I'm really excited about this whole thing. So looking forward to also, yeah, yeah, seeing where it all goes. Who knows?
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah, man. And it's actually inspiring me because, like, just speaking frankly, I have kind of taken a break from doing one-on-ones. I think I've not that, like, again, it's like fucking, I don't need to delve into thought. Like, I mean, why not? Yeah, like, I feel like, you're again, I'm like, nah. You're talking about the midlife crisis sort of thing before, and I definitely had a sense of, like, whatever that is, quarter life crisis, whatever, just like perspective of myself that got fucking ripped up and shattered in the best fucking way possible. And I've been like, there's been a feeling of like reeling from that, but reeling in the sense that like a ball of yarn getting thrown down a stairwell and like bouncing down the stairs as it goes, but getting like smaller and smaller and smaller as it goes. And then it's like, because Levi, I go through the same sort of feeling. Like I resonate with you a lot, and like everything you share, I feel like you're just talking to me in a lot of ways. And like how much, because I've done one-on-ones in the past, and how much I just discount. It's almost like there's a sense of like self-importance on the side of from the side of hiding yourself too. And it's like, who am I to assume or doubt myself? Like that's a selfish thing too. Like that's very selfish also. And so just showing up to a situation with someone, like seeing yourself, paying attention to them and sharing what you share, cuz like in a session, like there's no control. There's no sense of like a guarantee. There's no sense that you can do something for that person. Like, cuz you can't. Like you can't do any, like they're going to take what they take. So like all anyone can do is stay sensitive. So the less, it's almost like the more hesitant you are from a certain perspective, there's like a lot of health to that. Like if someone, like, someone who's been a therapist for a long time and takes a lot of pride in helping people, there's almost this aura of them doing something, like them being the ones doing it, as opposed to the person being there as a whole person who's, you know, caught up in some stuff, just like everyone's been caught up in stuff. And so it's just sharing space with someone. It's just having a conversation with someone, not too different than we go back and forth on here. It's just, you know, a more focused, not more focused situation, but it's a private situation instead of being out there. So yeah, all that said, we got a couple seconds left. So Levi, this has been a fucking blast. Definitely book a chat with Levi. Levi, I love hanging with you at the retreats, chatting with you. Always enjoyed all of our conversations, not the least of which being this one today.
Yeah, this has been a blast for sure. We are going to sign off here. Levi, don't go away because we talk after we sign off for a few minutes. But everyone else, we're going to be on Patreon after this. It's Sunday, which means we have 2 Patreon calls, a tier 2 and a tier 3. That's 3 hours of group conversation. So if you'd like to join us and have a chat, especially after this, because I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about, we would love to see you. Otherwise, we'll be back tomorrow, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time for another episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. Levi, we love you, buddy. So glad to have you on board. Take care, everyone.